In at number 10 is Wolverine. Back in the 2004-2005 story arc Enemy of the State, Wolverine is brainwashed by Hydra and the Hand, and he eventually breaks free and then goes after them, returned to his good guy state. But in 2007, as part of the What If line, the Enemy of the State plot made a return, and Wolverine stayed evil, with Kitty Pryde having to murder him by phasing her arm through his brain. As silly as that sounds, it was actually quite sad. And at number 9 is Thor. This evil version of Thor appears in Thor: The Reigning, where he gets all fascist on us, which is seemingly a trend on this list. He's taken over Asgard and decides to physically move it above New York City, which doesn't fly very well, and the Consortium of Nations launches an assault against Asgard, which also doesn't really go well, and kills a ton of people, humans and Asgardians alike. Then Thor rebuilds Asgard, merges it with NYC, and rebels start rising up against him. But it takes a century for anything to really happen, and at that point Thor has taken over the world, turning it into an ideal utopia that, well, isn't really that ideal after all, because people are really into drugs, like really into drugs. And at 8 is Hobgoblin. While there's been a few versions of the Hobgoblin over the years, this one is actually kind of sad. So once upon a time, a dude by the name of Phil Urich used the Green Goblin identity to operate as a hero. He takes on Daniel Kingsley's Hobgoblin and ends up killing him in self-defense, but then ends up taking on the Hobgoblin mantle himself, turning to the side of evil, working for Kingpin. He ends up having his identity exposed by Superior Spider-Man, and then when he's broken out of the prison transport by Green Goblin, he eventually becomes the new Goblin King, replacing Green Goblin. Fun stuff. And at number 7 is Mary Marvel. Mary Marvel is a member of the Marvel family, the DC Marvel family of superheroes, the group of superheroes all created around Captain Marvel, aka Shazam. Yes, it's confusing, but the characters were created before Timely Comics became Marvel, so it wasn't made intentionally confusing. Yeah. Anyway, Mary has always been pretty damn virtuous, but in 2006 she got sinister, provoked by the loss of her powers and falling into a coma, which, I mean, yeah, I kinda get why that would put you in a bad mood. She got her powers back from Black Adam, who was Shazam's main antagonist, which just kinda made her an asshole and allowed for her to be manipulated by some of the other villains in DC's Rogue Gallery. And at 6 is Kid Marvel Man. What's with all these Marvel characters going evil? Marvel as in the hero, not the you guys know what I mean by now. I mean, I kinda get it considering their history, but like still. So Marvel Man is actually not technically part of the Marvel family, but he's basically the British equivalent of Shazam, and his sidekick was Kid Marvel Man. After a nuclear bomb attack, Kid Marvel Man assumed he was the only person who survived, and decided to forever stay in his adult form, which eventually makes him go psychotic. So when he realizes that others were alive, he goes on a rampage and kills a ton of people in London, and then Marvel Man has to kill him. Dark. And number 5 is Batman, but more specifically Azrael Batman. After Bruce Wayne's Batman had his back broken by Bane, Bruce has to spend some time recovering, but crime doesn't take a vacay, friends. During the Nightfall story arc in 1993, Bruce needed a successor to look after Gotham while he took some time off. Instead of going with Dick Grayson, cause you know that'd be too easy, he opts for Jean-Paul Valley, who becomes Azrael, who was more focused on punishing the guilty rather than protecting the innocent. And then he goes rogue and Batman has to take him out once he's recovered. And at number 4 is the Hulk. Bruce Banner of Earth 9200 is an alternate version of the Hulk that goes evil, and adopts the name Maestro. So 100 years in the future, the Hulk survives a nuclear war that killed off a ton of the planet's inhabitants. So Hulk decides to use his superior intellect and those Hulk powers of his, and takes over the remains, which is now called Dystopia. He runs a strict regime, so much so that rebels start plotting against him, and bring Professor Hulk from the past to fight him. In at number 3 we have Angel. Venturing a bit out of comics for this one, let's take a look at Angel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So when you're a vampire in the Buffyverse, you don't have a soul. But Angel is the first exception to this rule that we see on the screen. He managed to regain his soul, and when we're introduced to him, he's working on the side of good. Him and Buffy get into a relationship, and due to the curse a gypsy set on him, that gave him his soul back in the first place, if Angel ever experiences one pure and true happy moment, the curse will be broken. So when he and Buffy have sex for the first time, the curse is broken, and he loses his soul, and then becomes his evil self and jealous, and well, things get really, really bad. 2 words: Miss Calendar. Damn it, Angel, why do you just gotta break our hearts like that? And at number 2 is Sinestro. He's the OG hero gone evil story. Dude was Hal Jordan's mentor and a Green Lantern. He was corrupted by power and started getting all fascist on his home planet. The Guardians were like, you can't really do that. So they stripped him of his ring and exiled him to the antimatter universe. But then he started rubbing shoulders with the people of Quard, and ended up getting a yellow ring to help him get his revenge. And finally at number 1 is Injustice. Like the whole damn comic and or game. We brought up Superman in our last list, and since it would be unfair to list each of these characters individually with their own numbers, Injustice is getting its own spot. We're looking at you, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and the Flash. Y'all are even worse than Superman almost. You slipped right into the herd mentality when Superman was tarnished by his grief and decided to go hardcore fascist on Earth's inhabitants. Although I will say, one of my favorite fights in the game though was against Equal Aquaman, who sometimes kinda looks like he has facial hair, cause I guess facial hair is evil, I don't know. At number 10 is Bucky Barnes. Starting off this list course, with a transformation that's become pretty mainstream due to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we have Bucky Barnes. Originally a close friend and sidekick to Captain America, Bucky was presumed dead, but later turned up as the Winter Soldier, a reprogrammed Soviet assassin. Bucky had no memory of his previous life, and the Winter Soldier was responsible for many political assassinations that made significant impacts on the Cold War. He's come a long way since that floating head on the cover of Captain America #1 that also has Cap punching a Nazi. And at number 9 is Iron Man. So this one's a tad complex, but I'll try giving you the Coles Notes version of this arc. In the Crossing story arc, Immortus, aka Kang, figures out a way of manipulating Tony Stark when he discovers a weakness in the link between Tony and his Iron Man suit. Tony goes around killing a bunch of people for Immortus. Then teenage Tony Stark is brought in from an alternate timeline, and now evil Tony Stark commits suicide, and then a little later on, Franklin Richards manages to merge this teen version with a brand spanking new reborn version of Stark. So he's good again. Woo? At 8 we have Quicksilver. So this one's cheating a tad bit since it's from the House of M, but Quicksilver is way too much of a dick in this one for us not to mention him on this list. Quicksilver takes advantage of his mentally unstable sister Scarlet Witch to change reality into one where humans are a minority and they're oppressed rather than mutants. His daddy Magneto becomes the supreme ruler, and in order to manipulate heroes to not want to reverse the timeline, Quicksilver aids in kidnapping Charles Xavier to read all of the heroes' minds and bribe them by giving them their deepest desires. Eventually, their memories are all restored and Quicksilver is blamed and Magneto kills him. Scarlet Witch does bring him back though, and in the process removes 98% of all mutants' powers, including Brother Dearest's. Quicksilver becomes obsessed with getting his powers back in Son of M, but eventually becomes good again. At 7, we have Adam Warlock. Nothing screams evil like a white afro, skull belt, and excessive shoulder pads. Adam Warlock has encountered his evil self Magus 3 times. First, Magus goes to the past and rules a religious empire called the Universal Church of Truth. He then guides his younger Adam Warlock self down a path of evil so that the events of the future all go down. But young Adam catches on to this, and with Thanos' help alters the future, ultimately erasing Magus from existence. This isn't the end of Magus though. The second time we see him is when Adam gets his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet. He tries to split up good and evil from his soul, but it backfires and they end up taking a tangible form, the evil taking the form of Magus. And then he encounters him again when he tries to fix the space-time continuum. Up next at 6 is Hank Pym. Hank has gone through many ups and downs over the years, but during his time as Yellow Jacket, he goes through breakdown number 3. Yes, 3. And decides to attack an already defeated foe with his biostings when working with the Avengers. Captain America's all like, this is probably not a good idea. So he launches a court-martial hearing against Hank. Then naturally, Hank's progression is, I will build a giant robot to defeat the Avengers, but I'll be able to disable it and I'll be the real hero. And they'll see how valuable I really am. Of course, his wife Janet figures out what he's doing, protests, and then this causes him to slap the out of her. While it's one of the most famous depictions of domestic abuse in comics, it was actually a mistake. Bob Hall, the illustrator, misinterpreted author Jim Shooter's direction, and the strike was supposed to be an accident initially. Regardless, Hank unleashes the robot named Salvation #1, but it ends up getting into a fight with him instead. He gets kicked out of the Avengers, Janet leaves him, he goes broke, and is forced to work for his nemesis Egghead for a while, which eventually leads to him getting thrown into prison. Inferiority complexes. They're the real evil here, friends. But cut Hank some slack. He's been struggling with mental illness for most of his existence in the comics world. And at 5, we have Daredevil. Daredevil has an arc where he gains control of the Hand and decides that he can use his new minions for his mission for justice. Except things get a little out of hand. No pun intended. He creates a headquarters in Hell's Kitchen that doubles as a prison, and his methods of dealing with foes become more aggressive. Many of his fellow heroes start to notice the red flags, but things take a turn for the worse when Daredevil kills Bullseye. Turns out though that Matt Murdock was just possessed by a demon called the Beast of the Hand, who the Iron Fist then defeats. Nothing like a demon to put a damper on your day. And at 4, we have Superboy Prime. If you're familiar with Superboy Prime, you'll know that he was born in an alternate timeline where all of the heroes you know and love were actually just fictional comic book characters. Sounds a little like real life. Anyway, he comes into contact with Superman from a different universe and gains powers which at first he's like, I'll do the heroic thing, but then his ego escalates real quick. Look at that. Corrupted by power, or rather, corrupted by boredness. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, his universe is eliminated, leaving him stuck hanging out with alternate versions of DC characters from the Superman canon, which gets old pretty quick, and he goes a little insane, carving a Superman S into his chest and then tries to destroy the universe. At 3, we have Cyclops. Alright, so here's one that you all debated about in our comment section in the last video, and that's very fair. Cyclops is working off of good intentions, regardless of how strangely misguided those intentions have become over the years with his narrative. But here's the gist of it. So after him and Emma Frost take over Xavier's school as co-headmasters, things go well for a while, but he starts to become obsessed with preserving the mutant race. So he's like, hey, let's move all of the mutants to an island and call it Utopia. That isn't questionable at all, is it? Even Magneto is super on board with this, and that's a big red flag. But Scott's like, nah. Then Schism happens in 2011, Cyclops ends up using young mutants as soldiers, and when the X-Men are attacked at the Mutant History Museum by the Hellfire Club, Cyclops convinces a young mutant to murder the Hellfire Club. Then a Sentinel attacks Utopia, Scott uses the students to defend it. While this is all happening, Wolverine is really not cool with Scott's new ideologies. The two end up fighting, and Cyclops is a total dick and brings up Jean Grey to try to upset Wolverine. Eventually, Wolverine ends up taking a bunch of X-Men away from Utopia, and it tailspins from there. Stern in his view, Cyclops ends up fighting the Avengers and even kills Charles Xavier. And it's kind of an accident, but it would have never happened if he wasn't a bit of a mutant supremacist. Now feel free to go forth and argue about that in those comments. And at number 2 we have Captain America. Dude joins Hydra. Enough said. It's a former Nazi organization, guys. This happens in Captain America Steve Rogers #1. Writers wanted to do something new for the character for the 75th anniversary of the character, beyond a new slick design. Apparently, prior to this 2016 comic coming out, there were clues and issues leading up to its release since the end of 2014. Many believe that the rhetoric used by Red Skull in these comics is an allusion for things said during the recent USA election, specifically Trump. Don't hate, just pointing out. According to this new story, Captain America was initially supposed to acquire intel from allies to give to the Axis powers during the war, and Red Skull was always using him as a spy. And at number 1 is Superman from Injustice. So this one makes our number 1 spot for 2 reasons. First off, Injustice is a bit of a conflicted series. Some people love it, and some people think it's a steaming pile of garbage. And second, he's objectively really evil in the Injustice universe, to comical proportions. And to be fair, he experienced some significantly crappy things. Jimmy Olsen is murdered, the Joker kidnaps Lois Lane, who is preggers with Soup's baby. The Joker then tricks Superman into killing Lois, and in the process he blows up Metropolis. So Superman kills the Joker. Like this. Then he becomes a total fascist tyrant until Batman recruits counterparts of our favorite heroes from an alternate universe to take on Superman. But there is still a huge war that happens because of it. For the record, I did enjoy the video game version of Injustice quite a bit, because it was super fun and Superman was significantly less irritating in it. Sorry guys, what do you think?
Number 10. Spider-Man during the symbiote costume arc. Spider-Man got his cool new suit during the very successful Secret Wars arc, run by Marvel in the 80s. In fact, this costume is actually submitted by a fan, Randy Schuler. But why did it turn him evil? Well, fan backlash. Fans hated the black suit because, well, fans hate all change. Despite this, nowadays it has become one of the more beloved costumes, but at the time, So in order to appease fans and find a way to get rid of this costume, it was revealed to be a symbiote that was altering Peter's biochemistry, trying to permanently bond with him, and causing him to fight crime even while asleep. Over time and retcons, the symbiote darkened Peter more and more, making him rougher and more violent, with it being heavily implied it would permanently change Peter for the worse. However, Spidey gets it off in every version before that happens, so that's why it only makes it in at number 10. Number 9. Raven, aka Evil Raven. The darkness inside Raven, planted there by her father Trigon, was always a part of her character, as she was in constant battle with it, having to suppress her emotions to keep her powers in check. However, Raven was seemingly possessed by her evil consciousness, which not only interrupts Nightwing and Starfire's wedding, but attempts to implant the seed of Trigon into new bodies. This led to a battle between her evil self and her good self, who was implanted in Starfire. It was complicated. Raven's struggle between her good and evil halves is part of her character. That wasn't even the first time she had succumbed to the bad half, which is why she is so low on this list, since when she turns evil, it's not exactly a surprise. One character people didn't expect this from at number 8. Sue Storm, who becomes Malice. Malice was the dark manifestation of the trauma already present in the, at the time, Invisible Girl's psyche, brought to the forefront by the Psycho Man following the stillbirth of her second child. This unlocked rage, allowing Sue to access levels of her powers that had previously been unseen, and of course gave her a far skimpier evil costume, because of course it did. She then went off and attacked her friends and family. She was freed of this manipulation by her husband, Reed Richards, because he made her hate him for real, which knowing Reed probably wasn't very hard. Seriously, years of neglect. This incident led to Sue changing her superhero name from the Invisible Girl to the Invisible Woman, and it actually became a significant period of growth for her character. Someone else opening up new narrative opportunities at number 7. Jason Todd, aka Red Hood. The second Robin's death arguably traumatized Batman less than his former protege's violent return to life, which left him unbalanced and furious that the Joker was still alive and well. Jason takes on the persona of the Red Hood, an ironic choice given the Joker's potential backstory. Todd becomes a vigilante with no qualms about using guns and killing, pretty much doing everything to be as defiant to Batman as possible. Jason became so unhinged he was briefly thrown into Arkham, but over time his level of mania has been toned down and he's become much more of an anti-hero. With the killing really dwindling and at points even vanishing, writers don't seem to really know what to do with Todd now. But hopefully he'll have a cool arc again soon. Number 6. Professor Xavier as Onslaught. Okay, so Onslaught isn't just Professor X. No, it's the fusion of the consciousness of Xavier and Magneto. This occurred after Xavier used his powers to shut down Magneto's mind, which rendered him catatonic. However, it was revealed that the darker parts of Magneto leached into Xavier's mind and bonded with the already dark parts present therein, creating a whole new persona. Onslaught was initially able to operate independently of Xavier's body, but eventually took possession of it. He then launched a plan that involved the Fantastic Four's son Franklin, and was seemingly destroyed by falling into an energy field. People's mileage really varies in terms of how they take this storyline. Some people really like it, others really hate it. It's pretty out there, but hey, it's comics. Number 5. Warren Worthington, aka Archangel, formerly Angel. Angel was one of the 5 founding members of the X-Men. However, during the Arch Mutant Massacre, he was brutally injured, impaled through his wings in such a manner that ultimately they had to be amputated. A despondent Warren is taken by Apocalypse, who promises him new wings if he'll become one of his 4 horsemen. He agrees, but this results in extensive genetic manipulation which changes his appearance and also renders him even more emotionally unstable. During this process, he is granted new metal wings. Warren becomes Death, the leader of the 4 horsemen, bolstered by a drug compound that allows him to operate without remorse. He is shaken free of Apocalypse's control after he thinks he has killed his former friend and teammate Iceman. However, although freed, the damage was done. Warren was no longer the same man, and he felt he no longer deserved to be a hero. While he ultimately did return to being a hero, these feelings never fully left him, and he works hard to keep his dark persona repressed. Another member of the X-Men at number 4, Jean Grey, aka the Dark Phoenix. Following her death and subsequent resurrection as the Phoenix, which occurred during the critically acclaimed relaunch of the X-Men in the 1970s, Grey went from being the weakest member of the team to the most powerful. However, her new powers were unwieldy and difficult to contain. During this time, the Hellfire Club attempted to manipulate her into becoming their Dark Black Queen. However, their attempts failed, and in the process her mind fully broke and she became the Dark Phoenix. The Dark Phoenix was a dangerous force who ended up destroying an entire solar system, killing billions. The Dark Phoenix ultimately killed herself to keep the universe safe. However, as we all know, Jean didn't stay dead. No, it was retconned that Jean never did any of those things. Instead, it was the Phoenix Force that thought it was Jean. This is because comic writers are really concerned about having people not root for morally ambiguous characters, which is exactly what happened with our number 3, Hal Jordan, who became Parallax. Before Parallax was retconned into being the impurity that causes the Green Lantern's vulnerability to yellow housed inside the central power battery, it was the name of the persona taken on by a crazed Hal Jordan. This was after the destruction of Coast City and the resulting deaths of many of his loved ones. This caused Hal to abuse the power of his ring. When the Guardians try to take his ring from him, he snaps. Hal goes insane, killing all of the Guardians except for Ganthet and a significant portion of the Green Lantern Corps, including his former mentor Sinestro, by, say it with me now, you've seen enough of these lists, snapping his neck. Hal Jordan proceeds to bogart the power rings and live a life outside of the superhero code. He is however swayed back to the side of good and dies throwing himself into the sun to reignite it during his redemption arc. Still, it was a pretty spectacular fall into villainy, but pretty much everybody he killed is alive again, so no harm done, I guess? Number 2. Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias, from The Watchmen. Veidt is probably one of the most dangerous types of transformations, because it happens slowly and without a clear catalyst. Well, at least before before Watchmen it did. He is also firmly convinced what he is doing is right, and is capable of justifying all his actions. From murdering former peers, to giving employees and acquaintances cancer, kidnapping the world's greatest scientific minds, and finally murdering millions. Veidt's actions to prevent the destruction of the world by unifying mankind against a common enemy become even more tragic when the threat he was so concerned about, namely the Cold War, has for many of this rising generation nowhere near the same amount of importance. Since Veidt is arguably that universe's greatest hero, not only in terms of prowess but also philanthropic work, it makes this revelation all the more tragic, even if there's a twisted mindset where it makes sense. Still, he represents a truly insidious danger, the evil you don't see coming. And our number 1, the Plutonian. He was once the world's greatest hero, however all that changed after he one day snaps, destroying the city he used to protect, Sky City, and murdering millions. This character was introduced in Mark Waid's series Irredeemable. The series even opens with the Plutonian killing a former ally. His downfall is the whole focus of the series, and because of that it's honestly worth checking out. It's really interesting, and because it's not taking place in any main universe, it can really go places other comics can't.